Well, it's about time. In fact, it is time. Why don't we all stand? We'll begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, send your Spirit upon us to open up our minds and hearts to fully understand and embrace your gospel message, especially as we apply your gospel, your Sermon on the Mountain, and focusing on the morality of human sexuality and marriage, to understand your full plan so we can embrace it in our lives. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Say, Mary the angels.
Pray for us.
Okay, please have a seat. Now, Martha wanted me to remind you, and how many of you are not getting married here at St. Mary the Angels? Okay. Just to let you know that this class doesn't include everything. You have to also prepare your marriage papers. Some of you may be doing it in a different parish, or if you're doing them here, even though you're getting married someplace else, there's marriage papers. You have to get baptismal certificates and do a prenuptial questionnaire and all these things. So please make sure you don't think that this class, oh, I passed this class, I'm free to get married. There's a few other steps that are involved. And if you're not sure, talk to Martha and make an appointment with her to come. Because normally you meet with me or Father Hill or another priest in another parish to do the paperwork, just as though you were getting married here. And then we send the papers to the place, the diocese, or the country even, diocese, where you're going to get married, so that you have everything's above board and they don't have any surprises. We don't want you to come to your wedding day. Where's your paperwork? We can't marry you because we don't have the paperwork finished. That's the worst feeling in the world. Or you don't, we forgot to get a marriage license. If a priest marries you without a marriage license, what happens? They're going to throw us in jail. Well, at least they'll put us, we could get there's legal consequences, let's put it that way. And we wanted to avoid those things. So just to make sure we get on top of that. And we've managed to handle things pretty quickly when needed, but I hate to do things last minute myself. So I always like to have everything settled and all the paperwork done. All we have to do is move into the church and do the ceremony and we're good to go. So, all right, tonight's topic, we're going back to the whole idea of Christian morality. We covered the 10 Commandments, except for 2 of them last week, right? And I think it was in this context of Christian morality really doesn't make a lot of sense to our society today. Everybody's doing cost-benefit analysis, and with that, you can pretty much justify anything you want to do as long as you find an appropriate benefit that outweighs the costs, as long as we're not hurting anybody. And oftentimes in the area of sexual morality and marriage, this is where the Catholic Church teaching gets criticized the most. People say, well, you Catholics, you even think that looking at a naked body is a sin. Heck, if God didn't want us to look, why did he make the human body so beautiful? Anybody hear some things like that before? And so, that stuff is all from the Middle Ages and stuff like that morality. It's not applicable to our day and age, And how do we respond to that? You guys have a response? need to have one, right? Because you're going to have children pretty soon. And those children are going to start asking those questions. Oh, go ask your father. No, go ask your mother. You know, go ask the priest. But we need to have these answers, and we need to, be wrestling with these things. First of all, so we know how to live our own lives, but also so that we can then communicate that properly to those we're responsible for. By the way, it's not the church that says looking at a naked body is wrong or immoral. Jesus Christ kind of said it. And you know where he said it? The Sermon on the Mountain. And he said, "You've heard it said of the ancients, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, anyone who looks at a woman or a man with lust has committed adultery with her in his heart." By the way, what was the punishment for adultery back in those days? In fact, throughout the whole Old Testament. What happened to you if you committed adultery? Yes.
Were you stoned?
You were stoned. It was a capital offense. And so Jesus Christ has said, just looking at a woman with lust, you deserve to be stoned. Now, doesn't that seem a little exaggerated? It does, huh? But think about it. Put it in terms of relationship. And I think you see things a little bit differently, and you'll start understanding where the church is coming from. Let's see, a guy and a girl, boyfriend, girlfriend, walking down the street together, holding hands, having a good time. And as they're going down the street, this immodestly dressed woman comes walking by. The young man, being weak as he is, starts taking some glances at her. In fact, his eyes latch onto her. He starts turning his head and bam, runs into the telephone pole. How would his girlfriend react?
Not well.
Well, not well? Why?
Betrayal of sorts.
Would she be angry? Come on, you women. How would you respond to that? How would you react to that?
He deserved to run to the telephone pole?
But what he says to his girlfriend, honey, you shouldn't be upset. I'm the one that got hurt here. I got this bump on my forehead for being so silly. Why are you so upset? Because he was unfaithful to her with his eyes. He basically said to his girlfriend, hey, honey, guess what? You got competition, and you happen to be losing that competition right now. It cuts to the core of the relationship, doesn't it? And this is why we have to understand Christian morality is not about just following a bunch of rules and trying to control us. It's about understanding how to love with our eyes. We need to learn to love with our eyes, with our heart, with our bodies. And we send a message by that. And it can be a very negative message, or it can be a very positive message. Some people say, well, you Christians, and what do you want us to go around with blinders on our heads so that we don't see anything? Why is Christian morality so negative? It's always about not doing this, not doing that, not seeing this, not... No, it's not about that at all. Let's take the example and give it a positive spin, okay? Change it a little bit. Young man, young lady, boyfriend, girlfriend, walking down the street together, holding hands, chatting, having a good time together. And as they're walking along, this immodestly dressed woman comes walking by. But this time the young man doesn't look. He pretends like he doesn't notice. In In fact, he turns and looks into his girlfriend's eyes instead. Now what is his girlfriend thinking?
Serious brownie points.
Wow. He really loves me. He only has eyes for me. He only has a heart for me. And you see, the act of not looking said more than hundreds of "I love you, dears" would have said. What do we say to Jesus Christ, or to our Blessed Mother, our guides, if we're looking at pornography? Guess what, Lord? You got competition. You happen to be losing that competition right now. Or guess what, Mary? You got competition. You happen to be losing that competition right now. It can kill our relationship, can't it? With God, as well as with your boyfriend or girlfriend. But at the same time, if we get a temptation and we don't look, we struggle against looking, we turn and look at a picture of our Lord or a picture of Our Lady instead, or a picture of your girlfriend, what does that communicate? Something positive. And that's learning to love with our eyes. So how important it is to understand that. And just to realize how, loving with our eyes is going to have implications. It's not going to be always easy. There's going to be temptation. But it's always something, in the long run, can be very positive. In fact, us Catholics and Christians, we're not even afraid of temptation. We can look forward to temptation. Why? Because it's an opportunity to show our love. So the young man can be very happy that this immodestly dressed woman comes walking by, because by not looking, he could say how much he loved his girlfriend. And how important. What do we say when we get a temptation to click on something that's, immoral, indecent, or provocative? But we don't. We resist that. Maybe we close the window and say, I'm going to do something else. We're making an affirmation of our love for God, our love for Our Lady, and those that are got other human relationships that fall into the spirit of love. You're saying how much you love your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband. Even if they're not around. Even if they don't notice. Now, so we can look forward to temptation, but this doesn't mean we put ourselves in an occasion of sin. So, a guy doesn't take his girlfriend to a topless bar to show her that he's not going to look, right? That's ridiculous. But when those temptations come up, he can be grateful for them by resisting them and showing that is. Likewise, we don't put ourselves in anything that's an occasion of sin, because we don't want to, because we do love, and we want to always be showing that love with deeds. By the way, if anyone here does have an issue with pornography, get some help. We have Doug Hinderer here already. He's going to be giving you the next talk. I think he has resources for this. But it's better to take care of the issue before you get married than after. Why is it harder to get over pornography, masturbation, and these kinds of things after you get married? You would think, oh, now I have a wife, now I have a husband, now I can get my needs satisfied. But my experience is if someone has a problem before they get married, that problem continues after they get married. Why? Nobody has a clue? It's very simple. Relationship issues. Suppose you have an argument with your husband, and you know he's not there for you that evening, and you just say, "Well, I don't need him. I can take care of this myself." Go on the internet and you know do some pornography, and man, these guys on the get me more excited than my husband does anyway. And then we give in to self-pleasure and see, I can do it without him. And besides that, it's his fault because I wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't so proud and wasn't so. And so it gets into this spiral of revenge and blame and everything like that. And it just complicates things, and it's because we never got full control over this issue. So, by the way, there are tons of therapists out there and psychiatrists that specialize in this. It's a big industry now, because porn is a big industry now. So, but it's better to get help now than to wait until after you get married. And worse yet, wait until your spouse discover you doing it, and that's the betrayal that is experienced. So get help. Priests here, we make ourselves available to your confessions and try to help you with some ideas on how you can wrestle with this as well. We're not here to make you put you on a guilt trip or anything like that. What we're doing is here to help you because we know this isn't key for your future. By the way, if you have children and one of you is doing pornography, guess what happens? Your children will be doing pornography and may not have a clue that dad or mom has an issue. How does a child pick up on this? Because mom and dad don't do this in front of the kids, do they? That would be pretty sick. But they pick up on it. Because children notice everything. And if something catches the corner of dad's eye, a modestly dressed woman on the street, a billboard, something on the screen, TV, a child looks. What was dad looking at? What caught his eye? And before you know it, he's more sensitive to those images than you are. You know, a few years ago, there was a Funniest Home movie of this little boy, 3 years old, at the beach. He was going to the little tiny waves lapping the shore. He was testing the water, and it was obvious it was too cold. He didn't want to go in. And then all of a sudden, this little boy does this gyration and falls over backwards in the water. And the camera pans, and it got 3 girls in bikini walking by. Everybody in the studio laughed. Oh, like father, like son, a chip off the old block. I could have thrown up. It was sick. A little 3-year-old boy doesn't have problems with girls in bikini. Unless dad does. And what's that boy going to be like when he's 12, 13 years old? He's going to be doing pornography. And may not have a clue that his dad has the same problem. Now, it affects girls too, but a little bit differently. Because when a little girl walks into the room where dad is, how does she want dad to react?
Positively.
Yes. She wants to see dad excited. Oh, my little princess, you're so beautiful, and holds her up. But if she sees what causes dad to get excited, or a modestly dressed woman, because she notices everything that dad notices. And if she sees what causes dad to really get excited, are these that kinds of images, and what's going to happen to her when she's 12, 13 years old? she's going to dress in an immodest way. Even if she knows that it's wrong to dress immodestly, she can't help it. It's an irresistible desire. Because she wants to attract someone like her father. And some girls even feel they have to get naked and share photos of themselves with others, guys, to attract someone like their father. Consciously, she doesn't know what dad's problem is. Do you want this for your children? No, I know you don't. But it happens. And that's why I'm telling you this now, so that if there is an issue, don't be afraid to get some help. There is help, and there's hope. And it's how important it is to resolve these issues, ahead of time. Like I say, it's easier to do it now than later. Now, what does the church teach about sex? When is it okay to have sex? When you like someone? When you're kind of committed to someone? Come on, you guys know this. What is it?
When you're married.
When you're married. Very simple. Sex outside of marriage is wrong for anybody. And that's what, but why? Why is that the case? Oftentimes I've had opportunities to talk with teenagers and young adults who are not in a committed relationship. But very often the question comes up, Father, why do we have to wait until we get married in order to have sex? Whenever I hear that question, I always respond with a question. It always buys time. And so I always ask, well, why would you want to? They look at you and say, what do you mean? Doesn't everybody want to? But then they have to come up with a good answer, right? And what's the best answer you can give to that? Why would you want to have sex with someone? Because it feels good? But that's not a very noble answer, is it? Because it's fun? Because everybody else is doing it? Because if I don't do it, then this guy's not going to continue dating me? Is that a good reason? No. How about because we love each other, Father? That's usually the best answer. And then I always ask them, well, what is love? This gets them thinking. Well, it's that warm, fuzzy feeling you have when you're with the person you like. Oh, a strong emotional attraction between people of the opposite sex. Nowadays, it's not even opposite sex. To really understand what love is all about, you have to, first of all, understand love is not an emotion. It may have emotional consequences or effects, but in itself, it's not an emotion. It's not something physical, even though there may be physical expressions of it. Love is something spiritual. Because otherwise, God could not love, because God is pure spirit. And we even say God is love. So by that we're saying love is something spiritual, isn't it? So what is it? What is love? Anybody want to venture a guess? Actually, venture an answer. I think you guys know what love is, right?
Caring.
Well, caring's going to be part of it. Yes?
To well regard the other.
will the good of the other, that's part of it.
Gift of self.
Gift of self, that leads to it. It's really simple. Love is simply a union of spirits through the mutual gift of self. Okay? But it's something very spiritual, but as human beings, we're not pure spirits, are we? Anybody here a pure spirit? No, we have bodies. In fact, there's an interesting thing about us, is everything spiritual about us has to be expressed in a physical way. Our thoughts. The philosophers say our thoughts are spiritual intentionalities, whatever that means. But how do we express our thoughts?
Speaking.
Okay, words, right? Speaking. Or it could be blotches of ink on a piece of paper, written words. It could be digital ones and zeros if you send text or email or whatever other, WhatsApp or whatever. But it's all physical realities that communicate something that transcends the physical. Our thoughts and intentions. That's just the way we are as human beings. And how do we express love? You guys are in love, right? How do you express love?
Words.
Well, you can do it with words. That's more the internal, but it's union of bodies, right? Could be holding hands. That expresses it. Could be a hug. That's a union of bodies, expressing a... Could be a kiss. Could be a sexual union is too. That's a union of bodies as well. All these union of bodies are meant to express a union of spirits, where we're one. And so, you know, if I'm talking to teenagers or young adults, it's usually someone gets it. It's usually a guy that gets it first. I don't know why, but he says, "Aha, Father, so it is okay. I mean, my girlfriend and I, we love each other, we have this union of spirit, and we would just be expressing that in a physical way if we had sex, right?" Well, you love your mother, don't you? Whoa. That's a different kind of love, Father. Well, but what's different about it? It's okay to give your mother a hug, isn't it? It's okay to hold her hand or give her a kiss even. What's the difference about the sexual union that's just so abhorrent with a son-mother relationship? Very simple. You could put it in one word. Anybody want to venture? What does the sexual union express that the hug, the kiss, the holding hands doesn't express?
Creation.
Starts with a T.
Trust.
T-O.
Hangman. Just became a hangman.
Yeah, it's getting that way.
Togetherness.
T-O-T.
Total.
Totality. Right? In the sexual union, you give your whole body to the other person. You don't hold anything back. You don't keep anything to yourself. and you embrace and accept the other person in their totality, unconditionally. And so, that's what you... So if a guy goes to his girlfriend and says, hey, honey, I really love you a lot. I want to give my whole self to you. I don't want to hold anything back. I want to give you everything. But just for tonight. What do you say? Can we do it? Is that okay? No? Why not? It's not total. So he sees he didn't get very far with his girlfriend. So he ups the ante a little bit. But I really, really do love you. I want to give everything to you. I don't want to hold anything back. Don't want to hide anything. But just for the next 6 months. What do you say? Is that okay?
Not total.
How about as long as things work out? Is that okay? No. How about until death do us part? Getting close. What do we call that?
Marriage.
Marriage. So the sexual union is expressing a kind of love that has this totality that we see only in marriage. And so that's why the church says outside of marriage, sex is wrong. It's a lie. Because you're expressing physically a totality without having the spiritual totality there. And what happens if you get accustomed to expressing this lie and totality without having it? What is that? What ends up happening? What happens to people who have sex up before marriage and then they get married? Is that sex associated with marriage? With a lifelong commitment? With a total self-giving? It's not, is it? Now, it could acquire that, but there's no guarantee. And what happens with a guy or a girl that does not associate a marriage and a lifelong commitment of love, total self-giving with sex, and they're married? What happens? Dr. Hinderer, what happens to someone who doesn't associate marriage with sex and gets married?
They have a sexless marriage and that doesn't work out so well.
Well, they may have a sexless marriage, or they may have sex outside of marriage. They may be unfaithful. And I think you would probably concur, we are seeing rates of infidelity today that we've never seen in the past. But it makes sense when you realize people are going into marriage and they don't associate sex with marriage. And then they get married, and if they're having sexless marriage within the marriage, they're going to find it outside of marriage. And it's the number one cause for divorce, I think, is infidelity. And that's why we're seeing rates of divorce. Nobody plans on this. Nobody goes into marriage thinking they're going to be unfaithful. Maybe 1 in 1,000. I think it's that low. I've never seen anybody say that they don't plan on being faithful to their spouse. But if rates of infidelity are where they say they are today, you just say, what's happening? And so the church is saying that sex belongs with marriage for a reason. Because we want you, that this commitment that you're making to faithful, total self-giving, exclusive, is not easy. And your best chances are if you start working at it before you get married. So again, confession is a good place to get started, because then we can clean the slate and really start having a program where we can start working at creating the virtues and putting structures in place so that you can actually live this. It can be loved, it can be done. And there can be a purification process as well to help you get there. I remember there's a Christian, he's not even Catholic, who talks about how his conversion, and he was very promiscuous in his high school and college years, and until one day he met this girl that he says was extremely beautiful, but he says on the inside as well as on the outside. And he fell in love with her. But she was a good Christian. She would not have sex with him. So he gave that up. And he became a Christian himself. And the two of them got married. But then he tells the story, he says, but I've never been alone with my wife. Every time we come together to get intimate, all my past girlfriends start popping into my head. And I can't get rid of them. I don't want them, they torment me. But it's not an unusual experience. Do you want that? I know you don't. And the best way to do it is go through a purification process before you get married. And we're here to help if you, again, you are tormented by that, memories and things. We can deal with that. Don't be afraid. For example, if you get these images in your head, get aroused and whatever, go take a cold shower. Why? Because you're telling your body, I don't want these thoughts. You're going to think about this stuff, these old girlfriends of mine, you're going to suffer. You'll be surprised how the body starts redirecting its energy. That's just one of those ways. Now, another thing that the Catholic Church teaches on sexuality that kind of gets criticized a lot is what the Church teaches on contraception. What does the Church teach on contraception?
Abstinence.
Abstinence from contraception, right?
Or from sex before marriage.
Okay. What does it say about contraception itself, though?
Contraception is wrong,
Contraception is wrong. Why?
because every seed is, of God, sacred.
It's
So
safe.
it shouldn't be interrupted.
Okay. By the way, there's a sin that's called onanism. You ever heard of onanism? It's basically interrupting the sexual act and spilling the seed on the ground. It dates back to very early on in the Old Testament, so probably about 1500 to 2000 years before Christ. A son of Judah named Onan had an older brother who died because he did something sinful. We don't know what it was. But his younger brother had to take his brother's wife to be his own. And he didn't want to have a child with her because that child would belong to his brother and that has died, and not to him, and would get all the birthrights and all that. And he just didn't want to go through that. So what did he do? He spilled his seed upon the ground. And God took his life that very night. It's a mortal sin. So already in the Old Testament, God spoke about this very clearly that we don't use contraception or contraceptive method. But you say, why? You know, we do all these other things for medical reasons and stuff like that. What's a big deal? But we have to say, what does it say? What does it communicate? I like to use a little graphic example that can illustrate, I think, the church's teaching on this. See a young man, young lady, boyfriend, girlfriend, cuddling up together on the park bench, getting romantic. And the guy goes over to give his girlfriend a kiss. And she says, "Wait a minute, Charlie. I don't want to get your germs." She opens up her purse, takes out a piece of saran wrap and puts it over her lips and says, "Okay, now you can kiss me." How would Charlie react to that? Would he be kind of disgusted? Right? Why? Is it a kiss to unify lips with a piece of plastic in between you? It's not even a kiss, is it? And something much more intimate than a kiss, we have no problems with putting a piece of plastic. Gives you an understanding. What do we say when we use contraception? I'm going to give my whole self to you, not hold anything back, not hide anything, giving you everything that I have, except for my fertility. What do you call a total gift of self where you hold one thing back? What do you call that? It's a lie, isn't it? It's not total. And so that's what we're doing. No, I'm embracing you and accepting you just as you are, unconditionally, with one condition: we don't get pregnant. What do you call unconditional love that you put one condition on? It's a contradiction, isn't it? And that's why the church teaches that contraception distorts the whole idea and the whole reality of the sexual act, what it's meant to express. That's why. But some people say, well, you Catholics, you allow natural family planning. I mean, you can, and it has the same impact and same consequence as contraception. Why do aren't you kind of, by the way, does natural family planning have the same consequences? Actually, it's pretty close. The effectiveness or the failure rate of natural family planning that's used correctly is about the same as most forms of contraception. Of course, the condom is the worst. It has a high failure rate, But there's one method of contraception that is more effective than natural family planning. You know what that is? You guys haven't studied this, I guess.
Abstinence.
Well, abstinence is not really contraception, but it's usually pretty effective. The one thing that's more effective is sterilization. But even sterilization has a failure rate. People don't know that, but it does. Because why? The body tries to repair itself. Whether it's a vasectomy or tubal ligation, the body naturally tries to and finds a way to, allow a person to get pregnant. It's amazing, but it's the science is out there. It's important to know the science. But why is natural family planning okay and other forms of birth control are not? Well, what does it say? Let's go back to our example and just change it a little bit. Boyfriend and girlfriend cuddling up together on the park bench, getting romantic, and the guy goes over to give his girlfriend a kiss. And he says, "Wait a minute, Charlie, I got this horrible cold right now. And you've got finals coming up. If you catch my cold right now, you're gonna have a really bad time. Let's not kiss until I get over this cold or until you get through finals." That's an act of love, isn't it? To not kiss can be an act of love. To not have sex can be an act of love. If we're thinking, I'm doing this because my spouse is really stressed out at work or overwhelmed with, taking care of a newborn or whatever, or, we have just lost a job, or we have these, there's all sorts of reasons why it might not be a good idea to have a child at this point in our marriage and family. And it can be an act of love to abstain for a period of time during the fertile periods of the woman. And see, natural family planning respects the femininity of the woman. It respects her natural nature as a woman and cyclic fertility. And it respects that. And understanding that and respecting that, and the husband and wife communicate a little bit more, can be something very enriching to the marriage itself. But it says something entirely different than contraception. And that's why the church, says it's permissible to use natural family planning. Because it's a way to help the couple express their love for each other even more. Now, natural family planning could possibly be used in a selfish way. Anything just can be. And if it's done in a selfish manner, of course it's not going to be moral. But it's harder to do that in a selfish way. Let's just face it. So, trying to understand this, it's learning to love. Really, the church's teaching on the 6 commandments, on the 9th commandment, on sexuality, is about teaching us how to love with our bodies, with our eyes, with our whole being. And it wants it to fulfill its natural purpose. I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions, because I think it can be very good to ask. By the way, if you want to save these questions and do it more in private or in the confessional, things like that, we can do that too, okay? That's one of the great things about going to confession. We always use the confessionals. We got new confessionals in our church that are more COVID, safe, and people like it because then they can keep their anonymity and keep things private and ask those kinds of questions that are very personal and very difficult. But I'll open it up here if you have any questions. Anything you want clarified or anything. Well, why don't we take a break, and then in about 3 minutes, Dr. Hinderer is going to come and talk about relationships and the challenges of relationships, which, we talk about can be one area of it, but it's not the only one. Okay? Very good. So let's take a 3-minute break. Otherwise, I don't want to keep you here all night.
It's like 15 months from beginning to end. And the entire 15 months, we never once lived in the same town. And the biggest question in my mind after the wedding is, what does this woman look like on a Monday? Because I had never seen her. I'd only seen her on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. That was it. So it worked out pretty well. We got 9 kids to show for it, so that worked out all right. All right, so, here's the deal, though. And I spent well, I'll get to that. We know the divorce rate's about 50%, even for Catholics, right? So just split this room in half, and half of you ain't gonna make it. Now, if I said you give me your life savings and I'll give you a 50% chance you'll lose it all, you'd say, I think I'll just keep my money, Doug. Why would I give you all my money and I got a 50% chance of losing it? All right, but that's the statistics. Now, of the half that don't get divorced, what's the story with you all? Well, somewhere between 25 and 50% of you all are gonna say, we're kinda happy. But at least half of you are gonna say, no, hell, we're miserable in this stupid marriage, we're just not getting divorced. Well, that means you got somewhere between a 10 and a 25% chance of actually being happily married. That sucks. I mean, the odds for that are really bad. Now, I spent 37 years of my life in the corporate world, always wanted to do this. I'm doing this now the last 5 years. I intend to do it to the day I die, because my mission is to make sure that every single person in this room says 20 years from now, yeah, we're really happy. We are getting along well. This was a good, yeah, we're not perfect, but yeah, we're happy. And we're really glad we're together. And that's my mission. That's what I want to talk about tonight. And I think I'm coming back once or twice more, I guess, I don't know. So here's what you got to understand. The person you're sitting next to has defects, has flaws. And you may not see them right now, right? Because that's that whole love is blind kind of thing, right? But you'll see it a year from now. A year from now, you'll say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that, you know? So to a large degree, success in marriage is marrying someone with whose defects you can live with, because you're going to be living with them the rest of your life. And the research out there is 70% of the conflicts that you guys will have, you will not solve. They are not solvable problems. You're going to have to learn to live with those and adjust. For instance, I'm a morning person. My wife is a night owl, okay? I get up, the best minute of my day is 6 a.m. and it's downhill after that. My wife catches her stride about 9 p.m., right? We first got married, I'd get up at 6, I'd look in the mirror, I'd start pounding my chest and doing the Tarzan thing. Now, I don't have a body like Tarzan, but so I thought it was kind of funny. And then she'd get like really angry. Like, what, come on, man, the day is going. Come see me in about an hour and a half, she'd say. I'm like, really? So, right, so I got to learn to live with that. And she had to learn to live with me being an idiot in the morning, and I got to learn to live with saying, hey, you ready for bed yet? No. Yeah, really, serious. Come on to bed. No, I'm not, you know. I'm starting to, or she'll lay in bed and read a book for like 2 hours. I'll wake up after 2 hours like, what are you doing? I'm still reading. Really? That's not good. All right, so a large part of this thing is learning how to live with and accept the defects that your partner has. Now, when we were young, just getting started, there was an older couple that kind of became a mentor couple for us, and they had a bunch of kids, and they kind of took us under their wing. The husband died maybe 7, 8 years ago. The wife died about 2 years ago, and she had been sick. All of her kids were there on the bedside, exactly the way you think it should be, and they're saying a rosary, and they're praying with her, and they're there to support her, and it's this beautiful thing. And the one daughter says to the mom, so you're looking forward to seeing Dad when you get to heaven? And she didn't answer right away. And then finally she said, well, yeah, I am. And daughter said, well, wait a minute, why did you hesitate? And she said, you know, on earth, your dad had a lot of defects. And I really came to love his defects. But in heaven, he's going to be perfect. And I might miss those defects. And I thought, that's the deal right there, right? If you can learn to love your spouse's defects, because it's easy to love the virtues. If you can learn to love the defects, man, I think that's the secret sauce. All right? So I want to give you a few ways of kind of looking at how relationships work and looking at how conflict develops and then how to resolve conflict when it comes up. All right? So, okay, that's a good one. We'll just throw that
That's one of the 50%.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Let's try green. Green's a good color. There we go. That's drawing out too. So this is the infinity. That's no good either. I don't like that. Throw that one away. Let's get rid of that. Let's try black. That looks really bad. Oh, that actually is not too bad. All right, so the infinity loop, right? Closed circuit, right? We're going to put the husband on one side, wife on the other, behaviors on top, emotions on the bottom. Behaviors trigger emotions. Emotions drive behaviors, which trigger emotions, which drive behaviors, and off we go. All right? So let's say tomorrow night this young man shows up and he's got a dozen roses. What emotion is that gonna trigger for you?
Happiness.
You're gonna be pretty happy when he shows up with a dozen roses. When you're happy, what are you likely to say or do?
Say thank you or be appreciative.
You're gonna say that you might give him a hug and a kiss. Without cellophane, right? Without a mask on, right? So when you're getting hugged and kissed and thanked, what emotion's getting triggered for you?
I'm gonna be happy too.
Now, you're happy, and when you're happy with her, what are you likely to say or do?
Kiss her back.
You're gonna kiss her back, right? You're gonna tell her how beautiful she is, and you might even empty the dishwasher or something. And now we're set up to have a pretty good night because we're doing things that are triggering positive emotions. Does that make sense? All right, let's flip it. Let's say he's supposed to be there tomorrow night at 6. He shows up at 7, doesn't call and tell you he's gonna be late. Now what emotion do we have going on?
Bitter.
Now you're bitter. Oh, good, that's a good one. I'm bitter now. All right, so when you're bitter and he walks in the door an hour late, what are you likely to say or do?
Ignore him.
Oh, give him the silent treatment. That'll teach you a lesson. All right, now when you walk in the door and you go to kiss her and she she gives you the cheek maybe, and she's ignoring you, what emotion's getting triggered for you?
Be confused, like what's going on?
Now you're confused. What did I do wrong? Right now so when you're confused, what are you likely to say or do?
What's going on?
You're gonna say, what's your problem? And you're gonna be like, really, what's my problem? Now I'm really irritated and now, right? Because guys are like, what did I do wrong? I don't know. It's like, seriously, really, you don't know? Right, so now we're set up, we're gonna have a bad night because we're doing things that are triggering negative emotions in each other, all right? There is literally nothing you can do that will not trigger an emotion in your partner. From the way you scratch your head to the way you sit to the way you cross your legs, it all triggers emotion. Now, normally, the emotion is so minor, you're not aware of it, because it's just normal kind of stuff. But sometimes you are aware of it, all right? So here's the deal. It is not conflict that causes disharmony in marriages. It's conflict avoidance, okay? So what happens, you're annoyed because you showed up late, but you don't want to get in a big fight, so you just say, well, I'll tough it out, I'll take it, I won't say anything, right? So one of the couples I worked with early on, they lived in the suburbs, they worked downtown, they both rode the same train together every day. One morning he came in the kitchen to put his shoes on, her backpack was on the chair. He moved it onto the floor, he sat down, he put his shoes on. She comes in, sees the backpack on the floor, loses her mind. She starts yelling and screaming. She got so mad, she wouldn't even ride the same train. I'm not even talking about the same car. She took a later train, right? And I'm up in my office that night, I'm like, there's an expression in my business, the problem ain't the problem. Right, so the problem is no one loses their mind over a backpack, right? What's going on? And she said, you realize I can't do anything right with this guy? Do you know he rearranged the silverware drawer because I didn't put the knives and forks in there right? Everything I do, he changes. I can't even put my backpack in the right chair. So he was doing these things that are triggering these negative emotions, but she didn't talk about it because she didn't want to get in a big fight, and it builds up and it builds up until all of a sudden a backpack triggers World War III, okay? We've got to learn how to talk about these conflicts. I'm going to tell you how to do that here in a minute. All right, let's see if we can find a different color that can work. All right, so this is how things go well or go bad when we're getting along. Okay, I want to talk about needs and fears in men and women. Any guess, what's a man's greatest need? It is not sex. What's a man's greatest need? That's number 2. It's a man's greatest need.
Stability.
What is it?
Stability.
Close. Man's greatest need is respect. What about a woman?
Appreciation.
Love. Love. Now this is very scriptural. Paul's letter to the Ephesians 5th chapter, where he says, husbands, love your wives, wives, respect your husbands. Here we are 2,000 years later, we now have scientific research that says St. Paul was right. Well, duh, he was St. Paul. Of course he's right, all right? Respect and love. Now, that doesn't mean men don't need to be loved and women don't need to be respected. But what it does mean is a man's going to be triggered more quickly by anything he feels is disrespectful And a woman will be triggered more quickly by anything she perceives to be unloving. Okay? What's a man's greatest fear?
Disrespect.
Good one. Failure. Okay? We fear failure more than anything. You ever see two guys sitting next to each other at a red light? When the light goes green, who's gonna get through the intersection first, right? It's like, seriously? You're driving minivans. You're gonna drag race a minivan through an intersection when the light turns green, right? But we can't, failure, that's why we're so competitive. Sports, school, at work, right? We're very, red lights, we're very competitive. What's a woman's greatest fear?
Infidelity?
What?
Infidelity?
No, but yeah, that's a big one, but yeah. No, it's abandonment. Well, it is kind of infidelity, right? Being told she's not important, being pushed aside, I don't need you. Okay? Now, I think this is scriptural as well. This goes back, I think, to the Garden of Eden. What was the first sin in the Garden of Eden? It was not eating the apple. First sin was Adam. He failed to protect his wife. The devil is tempting her, and he did not come to her rescue. He did not stand between her and danger. He let her there by herself. That was the first sin. I think us men have inherited from Adam this fear of failure, because he failed and he screwed the whole thing up. He didn't man up, okay? Abandonment now comes from that. So God looks down at Adam and he says, oh, not good to leave that boy alone. He's gonna get in too much trouble by himself. He needs some help. I'm gonna give him a woman. He didn't give him a buddy, right? He didn't give him a good buddy to hang out with on Sundays and watch football and drink beer. That's not what he did. He said, I'm gonna give him a woman. Woman's a radically different species, very different, whose purpose was to be the helpmate to Adam, to be there, to help the poor slob. And when we push a woman aside and say, I don't need you, that triggers the very core of why a woman was created. To be here to help us, because we can't do it by ourselves. And we need a woman to help us with that. So it goes right to her very fiber. She was here. Now we got research that says one of the best measures of a successful marriage is when the spouses accept influence from each other. When I allow you to influence me. Especially predictive of good marriages is when the husband accepts influence from the wife. Well, duh, that's how God set it up. Now here we are, we figured it out 5,000 years later. God got it right. Well, that's nice. Okay? So what you find though, a lot of times when you're having conflicts and you're not getting along, one of these 4 buttons is getting pushed. Right, so in our scenario here, where he shows up late and doesn't call and say he's gonna be late, we are feeling abandoned, like I'm not important. If I was important, you would have called. So it's triggering that. Well, then when you give him the silent treatment, kind of disrespectful. What do you mean you're not even talking to me? Well, now I'm pretty worked up. You're worked up, I'm worked up, you're feeling abandoned, I'm feeling disrespected. Let's go. Let's get, and it doesn't work out so well, all right? So what you find oftentimes when you're having conflict, one of these 4 buttons is getting pushed. Now there's other ones, there's all kinds of emotions that can get triggered, but these are kind of foundational. And certainly a man can feel abandoned, right? And a woman can be made to feel like a failure as well. So, we got all 4 of them, but generally, a man gets more triggered when he's made to feel like a failure. And a woman gets more triggered when she's told she's not important, that she's not needed. Make sense? Okay, all right. Now, I want to talk about, we'll keep this kind of scriptural bend going here. Try orange. You think orange works? Oh, it looks new. Okay. I want to talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I do not know how to spell apocalypse. So I always write it, so I run out of space. So I have to abbreviate. Yeah. All right. 4th apocalypse. So this was discovered by a guy named John Gottman. John Gottman is the leading researcher in the world on marriage. He's been studying marriages for over 40 years. He's got longitudinal studies following couples 20, 25 years. And he's brought the understanding of what makes for a good marriage to the level of science. and it's very predictable, right? He found that there are four behaviors that are highly predictive of disharmony, and if they're present at a high enough level, they are very predictive of divorce. That's a pretty good thing to know, right? And, because then you can avoid the four horsemen, all right? The first one is criticism. Right? You know what criticism is? It's when I'm pointing out what's wrong with you. Well, thank God I'm here to tell you how you're screwed up. Otherwise, you'd go through life like that, right? You're so fortunate to have me here to be able to tell you what's wrong with you. Well, we know criticism doesn't work real well, because if it did, every single couple would be happily married after about a year, right? Because I just tell you everything's wrong with you, you'd fix everything. You tell me what's wrong with me, I'd fix everything. And off we go, right? So criticism obviously doesn't work. Number two is contempt. Now, think of contempt as mean-spirited criticism. So contempt generally comes from a place of anger. I'm angry and I'm going to hurt you verbally. I'm going to poke you in the ribs verbally. So this is name-calling, devaluing. You know, my mother told me you were a loser. She told me not to marry you, right? That kind of stuff. That's contempt, all right? I'm really trying to hurt you now. Contempt is the most predictive of divorce because it's the most intentional. And it comes from a place of anger. Criticism sometimes comes from a place of love. I mean, I really love you, which is why I'm telling you how screwed up you are. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't tell you what a wreck you are, right? So sometimes you think criticism is from love, but it's not. Contempt is very difficult. Okay, number three is stonewalling. And stonewalling is when you just shut down. I can't take it anymore, I'm done, and you walk away. Okay? That's not too good. If the guy walks away, it leaves the woman feeling abandoned. If the wife walks away, it leaves the husband feeling disrespected, right? Wait, you turn your back and walk away, right? So, generally speaking, men tend to stonewall more than women. They tend to shut down and walk away more than women. Here's the deal. What the research shows is that once your heart rate gets above about 90, 95 beats per minute, you have lost your ability to be rational. You have lost your ability to think, and now you're just in fight or flight, okay? Number one. Number two, you take two newborns, put them side by side, you slam a door, the boy will jump, the girl will not. So we are hardwired from the day we're born to respond quickly to threat and danger. Well, we're bigger and stronger, and we're supposed to go, fend off the saber-toothed tiger so he doesn't eat the wife and the kids. All right? But we escalate, and now I'm in fight or flight. I don't want to fight you, so I got to get out of here. I just leave. Okay? I just walk away. Which, again, of course, leaves the wife feeling abandoned. And that's how it was in our marriage when we first got married. And we'd get in a fight about something, and I'd walk away. She'd say, come back. We got to resolve this. And I'd say, oh, no, we don't. Yes, come back. We've got to talk about that. Well, the hell we don't. I don't think so. And I'd leave, and she'd follow me literally physically. It's about 70% of the couples physically. The husband escapes and the wife follows. Up the stairs, into the bedroom, around the bed, down the stairs, into the garage, where finally I'd say something really mean. She'd start crying, and the fight would be over. Well, that's not really what I wanted, But at least the fight ended. But I didn't know how to deal with it any other way because I was flooded. I was overwhelmed. I was too worked up. I couldn't deal with it. Okay? So it's very important to be able to call a timeout when you're getting flooded. It's a good strategy. But what's the piece that people always forget to do? When you call the timeout, you've got to say when you're coming back. Oh, now I'm not feeling abandoned. Now I'm not feeling disrespected. You care enough that you're going to resolve this thing. You need a break. I got that. I could use a break too. You're coming back in an hour. That's terrific. Okay. Now we can calm down and we can come back to it. All right? Sometimes you're going to be so worked up that you ain't going to get it resolved that night. And that's the only thing I think in all the scripture I disagree with St. Paul said, don't go to bed angry, right? Well, sometimes that means you're not going to go to bed that night. Well, I like my sleep a lot, so I don't think that's a good idea. And I think it's okay to say, I really love you, but I'm so worked up. We're going to have to pick this up tomorrow. Let's go to bed. Come here. I want to hug you. I want to hold you as I fall asleep because I still love you, but we're going to have to talk about it tomorrow. And I think that's okay. But you got to come back to it the next day. Okay? All right? I also encourage couples to come up with a code word. And when you say the code word, that means the fight stops. right now it stops, and you honor the code word. So for my wife and I, the code word is spinach. Why spinach, you ask? Anybody want to know? Okay. Well, I love spinach, but spinach is not good for me because it's high in oxalates. Oxalates produce kidney stones. I've had 2 kidney stones. I don't want any more kidney stones. Those dogs hurt a lot, okay? When I'm angry and I'm yelling and acting a fool, it feels pretty good. But it ain't good for anybody when Doug is a fool and he's yelling and screaming, okay? So my wife's like, spinach, and you gotta honor the spinach, which is not easy, because by the time you get to, you're up here, last thing you wanna do is back it on down. Now, every once in a while, my wife will be gone and one of the kids will be in trouble and I'll be yelling at him and the kid will say, Dad, spinach, man. And I'll say, well, son, your mother's the only one who gets to call spinach. And she's not here. Fasten your seatbelt, because I'm gonna let you have it right now. So, but I think it's good to have a code word that says we gotta stop. All right, that's a good thing. All right, that's number 3. Number 4 is defensiveness. All right? You know what defensiveness is? It's not my fault, it's your fault. I got drunk last night because you made me mad. But making me mad, I'll quit getting drunk. Well, no, you actually got drunk because you chose to drink, 12 beers. Okay. You can't resolve the problem if you don't own your piece of it, okay? And if I'm blaming you for it, I'm not owning my share. The other way defensiveness shows up is when I'm like, yeah, okay, you know what, I showed up late, but you do the same thing. In fact, you come up later than I do, right? So, yeah, okay, I'm guilty, but you're guiltier than I am because you're worse than I am. That's another place of defensiveness. I had a couple I worked with that were, the husband was the epitome of how to do this properly, of how not to be defensive. His wife, they had 4 kids, his wife had 2 affairs, both of which were with guys that the husband knew. They weren't his friends, but they were guys he knew in the community. This guy played college football. Very first meeting with them, he said, Doug, I cannot tell you why they're not in the hospital. Because it wouldn't have been that long ago and I'd have put them both in the hospital in intensive care. He said, I don't know why I'm not, but I didn't do it. But he said, here's what you gotta understand, I'm partly to blame for this. Your wife had 2 affairs and you're saying you're partly to blame? Yeah. He said, I took my eye off the ball. And I know that if you don't look that ball in your hands, you're gonna drop it. He said, I got focused on my career, I got focused on coaching my kids at sports teams. I stopped paying attention to my wife. And I left her, he didn't know the word at the time, but he learned it, abandoned. I left her alone. I left her susceptible to these piranhas and who would seduce her. Starting now, that's over. Starting now, I focus my attention on her. And that isn't okay, what she did. We got some real damage we've got to repair here, because that's totally unacceptable. But I'm partly to blame, and I'm gonna fix my piece of this. Whoa. You think about that. I don't know that I could do that. I mean, that was, and this couple got their act together in about 2 months, and they're doing great even now. Because he owned his piece of it. I don't know how a husband says, yeah, I'm partly responsible, but he did, and he meant it. So, all right, so defensiveness. Now, these are 4, what you will find is, pay attention to this, every time you 2 get into an argument, and if it heads south, one of these horses showed up and you climbed on it. The minute one of these guys shows up, your conversation is gonna turn bad. Every single time. So I encourage you to put these on the refrigerator so that you become very aware of them and give each other permission. I give you permission to call me out when I start doing this. Hey, wait, it sounds like criticism. And I will say to you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that. Let me find a different way to say it. Well, it sounds like you're getting defensive. I'm sorry, I don't want to be defensive. Let me find another way to express what I'm thinking, okay? These, by the way, are also really good rules to have when you're raising kids. Hey, we're not gonna criticize each other. We're not gonna make fun of each other. We're not gonna walk away. We're gonna stay and solve the problem when we have a conflict. And I'm not gonna blame anybody else. I'm gonna own what I did wrong. I'm gonna own it, okay? So good rules to raise kids by, really good rules to guard your marriage and to safeguard your marriage in conflicts, okay? So this so when I work with couples, start with what are you doing that's triggering negative emotions? What are you doing in terms of respect and love and abandonment and failure. And then when are the horsemen showing up? And we can figure all that out. We can figure out where it's going wrong, okay? What we need to do differently. Make sense? All right, so now this is how things go bad, right? Well, what do we do with it? Right, now that we're having an argument, let's see how brown looks. All right, so I'm gonna put the infinity loop back up here. Here we go. Okay. Behaviors, emotions. All right, so what's the solution to this? How do we work this out? And the solution is actually really simple. So simple, in fact, you might think, well, it can't be that powerful if it's all that simple, but it really is, okay? The solution to this thing is a 3-step process called gentle startup. 3 steps to it. First is the expression, I feel. And you label your emotion. I feel abandoned, I feel unimportant, I feel disrespected, I feel unloved, I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel frightened. What are you feeling? Right? What's getting triggered here? I feel when you. So I feel unimportant, I feel abandoned when you show up an hour late and don't call and say you're going to be late. That's how I feel. That's what gets triggered for me. Okay? I feel when you. And then 3, and I'd like to ask you to please what you like it to look like next time. So I feel unimportant, I feel disrespected when you show up an hour late and don't call, tell me you're going to be late. I'd like to ask you to please call if you're going to be more than an hour late. Oh, I can do that. But you've got to do it in this order. If you start off with when you, it starts feeling like criticism or contempt, which is then going to trigger either stonewalling or defensiveness. So you got to start off with how you feel. Why does this work? Because the very foundation of it is this idea that I really love you. I don't want to hurt you. And if I'm doing something that hurts you, I want to know about it so I can stop doing it. And if you can tell me that in a way that is respectful and doesn't make me feel like a failure, in a way that lets me know I'm loved and I'm important to you, I will listen to that all day long because I want to be the perfect spouse. I don't ever want to do the slightest thing that's going to hurt you. And if you can let me know that I did that by being kind of stupid or whatever, I'm going to change and do what you've asked. Okay? And I'll give you a personal example. It was only a year ago, I think, probably. 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm in my office, I'm working on my computer. My wife brings me a cup of hot tea. I love hot tea. And I said to her, thank you very much. She said, you're very welcome. And she left. And she came back 5 minutes later. Now, the way my wife says it is, she says, I'd like to have a gentle conversation with you. She walks in and says, I'd like to have a gentle conversation with you. My reaction was, shit, how did I get into trouble? I've been here all morning. I haven't left my office all morning, and now I'm in trouble. That's what I said on the inside. On the outside, I said, yes, dear? She said, I felt unappreciated when you thanked me for the tea but did not look up from your computer screen. I'd like to ask you to look at me next time. I'm like, whoa. Right? And I'm like, you know, you're really pretty. I like looking at you. That's an easy ask. I mean, that's an easy ask. And so I stood up and gave her a hug, and I gave her a kiss, told her I loved her, and I apologized, and I said, I do thank you for that. Okay? We fixed that problem in 30 seconds. Now, what would have happened in the old days? Not so long ago, because we've only known this about 4 or 5 years. The space here between emotion and behavior, I call that the devil's playground. what happens is, once you get a negative emotion triggered, he gets in and says, hey, you ever seen anything like that before? Was he ever not as appreciative before? Was he ever not as grateful for some nice thing you did for him before? Well, matter of fact, he was. I remember just a month ago. I made him that special dinner, and he didn't seem to even notice. Oh, really? She'd have been thinking some more. I'd have come down for lunch, and she'd have been a little off, you know, a little terse maybe, just kind of ignoring me a little bit, maybe just giving me some one-word answers to my questions. And I had said something like, everything okay? Right, you okay? What's, anything wrong? She'd have said, nope, everything's fine. I said, you sure? Doesn't you seem like something's wrong? No, I'm fine. Sure, yeah, sure, okay. We'd have had lunch. I'd have gone back upstairs. I'd have worked all afternoon. All afternoon, she'd have been thinking about every single time in the last 41 years that I was not as appreciative as I should have been. I'd have then come down for dinner. She'd have been banging pots and pans. And I'd have said something really profound like, okay, something's got to be wrong. What is it? And she'd have said, everything is fine. And I'd have said, no, stop. Because you're banging pots and pans. You are obviously irritated. What is wrong? And she'd have said something like, well, nothing other than I'm married to the rudest, most inconsiderate slob on the face of the earth. And I know criticism when I hear it. And I said, I don't think so. I think you're pretty doggone lucky to be married to me. I know the guy you dated before me. He was a loser. I should have let you marry him because I saved your butt from all that. And we'd have been off and, right. I'd have got defensive. The whole thing would have ended up in a big fight. Okay. Well, we did that for about 30-some years. That's how it played out. Until we learned how to do this. And now we get 98% of our conflicts solved in under 30 seconds. Because 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, when you irritate each other, it's not intentional. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, how can I make her feel unappreciated? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll wait till she does something nice for me, and I won't look at her. Well, I didn't plan that, but I'm busy, I'm focused, I'm doing a blog post thing, which I hate. But you know, so 9 times out of 10, when you do something that triggers a negative emotion in each other, it's not intentional. But you're flawed, you have defects. And as hard as you're gonna try, you're still always gonna have defects, okay? So let's find a gentle way for me to help you be the husband that I need you to be and the wife that I really want you to be. Some of these things you'll be able to change and some of them you won't. I've stopped pounding my chest at 6 in the morning. I don't do that anymore. I still want to, but I don't, right? So some things you can change, some things you can't. I'm never going to be able to stay up till midnight with her. And she's like never going to get up at 6 a.m. with me. It just isn't going to happen. And that's okay. Worked out pretty good when we had kids, because if they woke up anytime after about 4 a.m., I took care of them because I was good to go. And once it was 9 o'clock at night, they were hers, and you know, so it worked out. So I think, here's the deal. I think God actually gives you the spouse you most need to grow in whatever virtue you most need to grow in, right? So if you tend to be impatient, God may give you somebody who's late a lot. Okay. If you tend to be miserly and really tight with a buck, he might give you somebody who donates $20 to every single person who calls on the phone looking for $20, right? And you get the tax time and it's like, you realize we gave $20 to 102 charities last year. Why did we do, you know? So God will, if you can look at your spouse's defects as an opportunity to grow in virtue. Then all of a sudden it's kind of a gift. All right. Oh, okay, so we're just about there. Last piece for this is the rule, seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. Seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. So here's how this works. You and I are having a conflict about something. We got a problem, we got a little conflict going on. And I've sat here and I've thought about it. And I've figured out what the answer is. And so in my mind, I'm like, if you will just be quiet, I will tell you what the answer is. I'm going to save us a whole lot of time and discussion. And you're going to sit here and think, well, thank God Doug's here. He's so bright, I don't even have to worry about it. That's what I'm thinking. You, on the other hand, you've thought about the problem, and you're like, well, I got this thing figured out. Doug, if you would just shut up, I'll tell you what we need to do, and we're gonna save ourselves a whole lot of time, and you're gonna be real grateful I'm in the room, and I'm so smart, because now you don't have to worry about it, right? So we both have figured it out. Which of us is right? Both of you. Here's why. Because I've thought about the problem through my lens, based on the home I grew up in, the parents I had, the siblings I had, the schools I went to, the friends I had, the education I got. I took all of that for the past 65 years and I put it into play and I came up with an answer. Well, you did the same thing. The family you grew up in, the parents you had, the siblings you had, you put it all in there and you came up with a different answer because you got a whole different background than I do. We come from radically different places. I don't even know where you come from. I just know it's pretty different from where I came from, right? So, if I seek first to understand what you're thinking, how you figured it out, that's showing that I love you and that you're important to me, not abandoned. I really value your input. And when you're seeking to understand how I feel, you're saying, Doug, I respect you. And I think you probably have a pretty good idea. That's probably not a failure idea. It's probably pretty good. And I really want to know how you feel about it. So it's one of the most respectful things you can do for each other is seek first to understand the other person. Help me understand. Because you know you're marrying a pretty bright person. If they figured something out, they got a good reason for it. Now, I mean, they still might be wrong because we get it wrong sometimes. But they didn't just pull it out of nowhere. They didn't just say, what's the wrong answer? That's the position I'll take. I'm going to argue. Right? It's hard to figure it out. All right. So I think this is the single most important thing that I ever talk to anybody about. If you can just do these 3 steps, you give yourself a huge edge to having a really good, happy marriage. You're going to have your conflicts. You cannot avoid it. You have too many defects. We got original sin. Along the way, we pick up a few bad habits. There's the 7 deadly sins, right? We get prideful, we get angry, we get lustful, we get envious, we get, all the, I can't even tell you all 7 are. And so that's the second thing, we got our own defects. And third, you got the devil who's constantly on your shoulder trying to drive a wedge between the two of you. I mean, Sister Lucia, the third seer from Fatima, sent John Paul II a letter where she said it had been revealed to her Satan's final battle was going to be against marriage and the family. Well, we can see where it's going right now, right? I mean, the divorce rate. Now anybody can get married to anybody for any reason, whether race, sex, creed, color, it doesn't matter. Gender confusion and the whole thing's kind of falling apart. You can see where Satan is really working hard to drive a wedge between good couples. And especially the better job you're doing, the more he's going to try to pull that apart, right? All right, well, that's all I know. Any questions about any of this? Cool. Wow, that's good, huh? All right. Good. All right, so is this like a one and done thing for you guys, or is this a series? Series. So, and then you, once a month?
Once a week.
Once a week?
For 5
Okay.
weeks.
For how many?
5 weeks.
5 weeks. And what week is this?
3.
Week 3. Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm coming back, I think, but maybe it's with a different group. Huh? He probably runs a bunch of folks through here. All right, can I take one more second? I mean, there's just one more thing I think is really important. Since I thought maybe I'd be with you guys again, but I want to talk. John talked about what love is. I want to talk about that too, because there's 4 pieces to it. All right. And this is based on C.S. Lewis's book, The 4 Loves. All right. The first one is philia, which is the love of friendship. I don't know if I even spelled that right. That's a P, actually. All right, so that's the love of friendship, and that's based on common interests. Okay, and that's kind of how you got connected. You both enjoyed playing tennis. You got things you enjoyed doing in common, and you developed this friendship around some common interests. Okay, and that's good. All right, so friendship. Second is storge, which is Affection. It's a gentleness, a gentle love, a gentle tenderness. Think of a mother holding a new baby, okay? That's storge. That's the love of gentleness and affection and tenderness, all right? There's a reciprocal nature to these two. As I get to know more about you, I love you more, and I feel more affection for you. And the more affection I feel for you, the more I want to get to know you, the more I want to get to know what's going on inside your world, okay? And so there's a reciprocal nature here between friendship and affection. And marriages go bad a lot of times when they take their eye off the friendship ball. You know, we get busy with kids and soccer practice and stuff, paying the bills and careers. 3 is eros. And our society equates eros with sex, and it really isn't the original deal. Yes, you have to, it's an important part of life to want to unite physically, to want to have sex with each other. If you're getting married and you don't want to have sex, I would say do not get married. That's just, you need to have that physical desire. That's an important part of what marriage life is all about. It's that total gift of self that Father John talked about. But eros is really, I love you because of how you make me feel. Okay, so I love you because when I'm with you, I'm really happy. I'm really looking forward to being with you because when I look at your face, I smile. When I hear your voice, it makes me feel good. When I'm with you, my heart skips a beat. You make me feel really good. That's eros love, okay? And then the 4th love is it's the sacrificial love. Agape. It's agape. Okay, and the role model for agape love is Christ, who loved us so much that he died for us, okay? And agape is, I love you so much that I will die for you. I will surrender the me in order to form the we. The we is now more important to me than the me. That's storge. Now, are you going to actually die for your spouse? Probably not. But will you need to die to your selfishness? Will you need to die to your impatience? Will you need to die to your temper, to your anger? Yeah. Yes, you will. So there's a sacrificial love that says, I will sacrifice anything for you. I will die for you. I will let parts of me die for you. And now there's a reciprocal thing here between eros and agape. So the happier I am when I'm with you, the more I'm willing to sacrifice for you. And the more I sacrifice for you, the happier you will be when you're with me, which means you'll be happier to sacrifice yourself for me as well, okay? I think all 4 of these loves are necessary for a good marriage. And if you're lacking any one of them, you need to rethink this thing, okay? And I used to ride the train downtown for 25 years, and I can remember sitting behind a group of 3 women once, young women, I don't know, 30-something, and they were making fun of one of their girlfriends who just got married who wasn't on the train because she is now catching an early train to get home and make dinner for her husband. And the one girl said, I take care of my needs first, and then when I'm done, I'll take care of my husband. And I'm like, oh, sweetheart, that ain't gonna work. That thing isn't gonna work, right? So you need all 4 of these loves to make a good marriage. The research shows the 3 foundational legs of a long-term, sustainable, happy marriage are friendship, affection, and an appreciation. That I am grateful for the gift that you are, that God gave me. And I tell you that every day. I appreciate you every day. Friendship, affection, appreciation. That's the deal right there, okay? All right, I got a lot more. I actually have a half-day workshop that I just gave it to y'all in an hour, so I got more I can talk about, but we're out of time, okay? Or 45 minutes, actually. All right, any questions for me? Good luck, y'all. You know what? Congratulations. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. And I wish you all of the success in the world. Yes, ma'am.
You said you have a blog post, you have a website?
I do. HappyMarriageForLife.com. HappyMarriageForLife.com. Okay. And I'm going to take a week off in the end of February, and I'm going to try to write a book on, on suffering in marriage. That's the book. how to suffer and still be happily married, because there's gonna be suffering. It's hard to see now, because you're so in love, it's like, how could you ever, but it won't take long, and those defects will show up, and that's the deal, so. All right, yeah, so happymarriageforlife.com, and if there's anything I can do for you all, let me know. If not, good luck. Keep Christ in the center of this thing, and it will work, I promise you. That's the deal. Okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure, all right. Father John, anything else? No. All right, go get him, have a good night.